Welcome to the 5.4 Factoring Greatest Common Factor video notes. For part 1, we're going to find their missing factor. So what are we multiplying each thing by to get to our product? In this case, for part A, I have a 4x squared times what is going to give me that 28x to the fourth. So doing the opposite of multiplication would be division. So if I divide 28 by 4, that means I'm left with a 7. And if I did x to the fourth divided by that x squared, here when we divide like bases with an exponent, we just subtract those exponents. So 4 minus 2 leaves us with an x squared. So that means my final answer is 7x squared as that missing factor. For part B, we're going to do the same thing. Here I have something times a 3x to the 3. So that means negative 30 divided by 3 is equal to a negative 10. And when I do x to the 7th divided by x to the 3rd, I have a leftover x to the 4th. Remember, 7 minus 3 is 4. My final answer would then be a negative 10x to the 4th. For part C, I have a negative b to the 7th. This negative b means I have a negative 1 in front for my coefficient. So 5 divided by negative 1 is negative 5. And when I do b to the 8th divided by b to the 7th, 8 minus 7 is just a 1, which means I'm just left over with 1b, or b to the first, if you will. So that final answer is a negative 5b, or you could write negative 5b to the 1. Both are correct. So our greatest common factor of 2 or more whole numbers is the largest factor that divides evenly into each of the terms. So we're just looking for what goes into both of our terms, and it's the highest number possible. This part 2 TI Inspire Quick Pull we will be doing in class, so do not worry about that right now. We'll handle that later. Factoring, down at the bottom of the page, is just backwards distributive property. So if we're undoing multiplication, that means we're doing division. So here, if I was to distribute this, that means I have my 2x times the x and my 2x times that minus 4. That gives me a product of 2x squared minus 8x. Here for factoring, I'm going to be taking out my greatest common denominator, or my greatest common factor. So 2 and 8 both have a 2 in common. X squared and x both have at least one x in common. So if I take that out, I'm doing 2x squared divided by a 2x. That leaves me with just an x. And when I do 8x divided by 2x, I'm just left with a minus 4. So for the second one, a negative, this is a negative 1 I distribute to each term. When I multiply, which means I'll get a negative x squared plus 2x and a minus 1. But over here, if I wanted to factor that product, I have a minus 1, a 2, and a negative 1. So my greatest common factor would be that minus 1. I have an x squared, an x, but no x over here, so I can't take out any of the variables since they all don't have a variable in them. So that means my minus 1 is my greatest common factor, and I would be left with an x squared minus 2x and a plus 1. So when you are factoring a polynomial, you're just rewriting it in a different form. We are not going to be changing the value of those polynomials. They stay how they are. So if you switch over to the next page, we're going to be looking at our steps in order to find the greatest common factor and just factoring any of our polynomials. So step 1 is always finding the GCF for those coefficients, the numbers. You always want to look at those numbers. Then we want to find the GCF of the variables. So if every single term's got some sort of x in it, we can take out an x. Then you want to divide and write that as a product, and we're going to have to check afterwards for distributing or graphing it to see that they are exactly equivalent. So for question 7, we're going to factor each polynomial below. So that means I have an 8 and a 10, step 1. Just look at those numbers. 8 and 10 only have a 2 in common. So if I divide 8x by 2, I'm left with a 4x. And if I divide a negative 10 by 2, I'll leave a minus 5. This is our final answer. If I wanted to check by distribution, that means I'm distributing this 2 to the 4x and to the minus 5. 2 times a 4x is 8x, and 2 times a minus 5 is a minus 10. For question 8, 15, and 5, that means I'm going to be taking out a 5. Now I have an m squared and m, so that means I can also take out an m. Sorry about that. That means I have a 5m out here. I'm left with an m and a 1. So if I did 15 divided by 5, that means I would be left with that 3, right? So I need that coefficient of the 3 in front of the m. So if I want to check by distribution, I would be left with 15. M times m is m squared. 5m plus 1 is plus 5m. Down here at question 9, I have an x squared minus 9x. Looking at those numbers, I have a 1 out in front. 1 and negative 9 just have a 1 in common. X squared and x have an x in common. So a 1x is going to be my greatest common factor. If I was going to check by distribution, I would be doing x squared divided by x leaves me with 1x, and negative 9x divided by x leaves me with a minus 9. So I'm going to distribute this 1x to each, and I'll get x squared minus 9x. So that means x times x minus 9 is the final answer. If we go up to question 10, 6x squared plus 12x minus 4, what does 6, 12, and 4 all have in common? That would be a 2. 6x squared divided by that 2 will leave me with a 3x squared. 12x divided by 2 leaves me with a 6x. And then a negative 4 divided by 2 leaves me with a minus 2. We can check this one by graphing. What we can do is go to our home page, open up a new document. We're going to say no, and I'm going to go to graph. For f1 of x is going to be the original, so 6x squared plus that 12x and minus 4. Hit enter and graph it. Now I'm going to hit tab so I can open up a second function to graph, and I'm going to graph 2 times parentheses 3x squared plus 6x and a minus 2. Close those parentheses and hit enter. Now my graph, this red one, is that second function, our answer. It is right on top of the blue graph, which is our original question for 10, which means that those graphs are overlapping and are equivalent. So that means that when I graphed this, they did check out. When they're right on top of each other, they're equivalent and they are good to go. For question 11, 4x squared plus 6, the highest common factor for 4 and 6 would be a 2. So 4x squared divided by 2 just gives me a 2x squared, and a 6 divided by 2 gives me with a positive 3. I cannot take out any variable here because the 6 doesn't have an x at all. You can check by distribution and get 4x squared plus 6, so we are good. This is our final answer. For question 12, 18c squared minus 9c plus 6, I'm looking at something that goes into 18, 9, and 6. That highest factor, well, 3 goes into 18, 3 goes into 9, and 3 goes into 6. So I believe 3 would be that common factor. I have a c squared, a c, but then no variable over here, so that means I can't take anything else out. So that means I am left with 6c squared minus 9 divided by 3 gives me a minus 3c, and 6 divided by 3 leaves me with a plus 2. If I wanted to graph this, I could check that, and it would work out well, or we can just do a distribution real quick, and I am left with 18c squared. Distribute that, and minus 9c, and then distribute that, it's a plus 6. So we are good to go for our check. For question 13, I'm talking about a rectangular poster, which means it's 4 sides, and it has an area of 15x plus, so area is equal to 15x plus 20. The length of the poster, so that length is equal to 5. What is the width? So we're trying to find our missing factor because area is also equal to length times width, and we know what the length is. So if area is 15x plus 20, and that's going to be equal to 5 times w, that means I'm taking out a 5 here. So if I'm left with 5, my width is going to be 15x divided by 5 would leave me with a 3x, and I have 20 divided by 5, which leaves me with a plus 4. That means that my width should be 3x plus 4. Now, if I distribute this 5, I should get this 15x plus 20, which means that I did it right, and then our width would be 3x plus 4. 5 times 3x does leave me with a 15x, and 5 times 4 does leave me with a plus 20. So our width is 3x plus 4. Thank you very much for watching this video.